talk about the problems that I'm seeing within DAOs and impact communities. So first, what are DAOs? So, DAOs has decentralized autonomous organization within the name. So first I'm going to talk what decentralized even mean. So decentralized means the distribution of power. Autonomous, it doesn't mean that we don't use, let's say, human beings, but rather that we make decisions and we take actions on our own, meaning that we're sovereign. And organizations is just a group of individuals. So yeah, what are DAOs? DAOs are magic internet organizations, or as Cooper said, DAO is a commitment to share value within a community. So many people just say DAOs are multi-sig, multi-sig, multi-sig. Other people say that DAOs is just a way for communities to share value. And when I say share value, I don't mean necessarily financial capital. I mean any sort of value. Kevin Owocki says that DAO is in the intersection between individualism and collectivism. And yeah, basically it's like a way for human beings to express themselves and at the same time do something for the community. There are many different types of DAOs. There's DAO operating systems, which is basically just templates for DAOs. There's investment DAOs, which essentially are investing into different protocols and in different organizations. Grants DAO, which are essentially helping out the ecosystem of a specific, let's say, protocol. Collectors DAOs focus on collecting, obviously, different works. And then we have service DAOs that are providing services to different organizations within the ecosystem. Social DAOs, which I think are going to be huge, are basically just a group of people coming together for a specific reason. And then media DAOs, which I also think are going to be huge. In the DAO space, a lot of people think that DAOs is just like, let's vote for something. And we forget that in the traditional governance, let's say in the nation states, we also have media. Media plays a huge role within DAOs. Why? Because like that, people get to know a little bit more about what the organization is about. So yeah, I think that media DAOs are going to be huge. Also, Kevin talks about like how these DAOs can be stacked on top of each other. And yeah, now let's talk about what are the problems within DAOs. The first problem is that when you're starting a DAO, it's very hard to define the purpose of your DAO. People within your community might think that your DAO should be doing X, while other people might think that you should do Y. So it's really, really hard to bring everyone together on the same boat. And that's like one of the major issues. Why? It's because when people are not really aligned with the purpose, everyone is going in very different directions and not really making sure to follow the purpose. The lack of resources is also a huge problem within DAOs. And when I talk resources, I'm not talking only about financial resource. There are like different type of capital that are needed within the organization, like social capital, which is human capital, and many other forms of capitals that are needed. And yeah, the main problem that I see currently within DAOs is that it's very difficult to align incentives. You have investors, you have the founders of a DAO, and then you have the contributors that are joining the DAO who might think that there's not enough incentive for them. So yeah, it's like I believe, is like one of the most difficult things that we're experiencing right now in the space, is how we can not only align incentives for the financial contributors, but also to the people that are generating value. Why? It's because that value is actually very, very hard to measure. It's very hard to say, okay, this person contributed this amount of hours. Other people think, well, it shouldn't be based on hours. It should be based on actually the output. And other people, they also think, yeah, it shouldn't be based on the output necessarily, but it should be output plus time plus whatever. So it gets really, really complex. And yeah, I think that if we don't come together and we don't define how we want to reward each other, it's just going to be very, very difficult to align incentives. Also, another thing is that we have very complex language within the ecosystem. A lot of acronyms that people don't understand, and it's just hard to onboard new people to the space when what they're reading is just super hard to get right away. Also, we in the space, we call stuff wrong with the wrong words. For example, we say stable coins. Stable coins are not really stable, and we call them stable coins. Stable coins, they're in reality what I think are peg currencies. And these peg currencies, they've been losing their value since they've been, let's say, introduced to society. So yeah, I think that we need to start calling things what they are. Also, we are using DAO as a very broad term, and everything is a DAO now. But it's really hard. Actually, we need to define what makes a DAO really a DAO. Because decentralization is not like a 0 or 1 thing. It's not binary. It's actually a spectrum. So decentralization, the more you zoom out, the more you realize that something is actually centralized. Another one that is very difficult is actually to onboard contributors. So let's say you are a leader of a DAO, you're putting a lot of time to onboarding someone, helping them understand what's going on, helping them understand where the different tasks and tackle could be. But there is an issue with that. And the issue is that a lot of times you put, so much effort into onboarding someone, but maybe that someone is there only for 1 week or 2 weeks, and then that person just goes away. So, for people that are leading DAOs, it's really hard to first, let's say, put a lot of time and a lot of effort into bringing someone, and at least someone just leaves afterwards. So one thing that I believe that we need to do in order to create, let's say, more sustainable onboarding is actually to create games where people are able to learn what's going on around the DAO and make it fun. So hopefully they stick around and they just not leave whenever they don't find something. Another thing that happens within DAOs is that, and not within DAOs, actually in the whole space, we humans, we're used to be told what to do. When we go to school, the professor comes and give us an assignment and tells us, you gotta do this assignment. And because of that, we're kind of like programmed just to follow and not really to take initiative and take ownership of things. So if we see that something is broken, it's not that we just go and try to fix it, but rather it's like, okay, is someone gonna tell me when to do it or how to do it? And that's also another big issue that we have within DAOs. And I personally believe it's because we lack culture. We lack culture of, let's say, contributing and taking ownership of things. Another problem is the contributors' expertise. Some people, they call themselves experts, and I personally believe that there's no experts in the space because we are all learning. We are all, let's say, working towards, let's say, these ideas of decentralization, but we are learning in the process. Also, another issue is that there's people that don't have enough confidence because they haven't done it in the past, so they think that they lack the expertise. And sure, they might do lack the expertise, but that doesn't mean that you cannot tackle things. So it's like a double-edged sword. So for some things, you might want some people that do have, let's say, experience and have had the opportunity to see how these systems work. And then in the other side, you also want people to try things out. So it's actually hard to find that balance. One of the big issues is the lack of accountability. So we're seeing that there's like a lot of delegates across, let's say, different DAOs and so on. Okay, but these delegates, they get, let's say, their position, and then there's not really accountability on what they do and how they do it. So I think that one way of, let's say, improving this is by having something that we do in the traditional world, which is that we have terms for, let's say, elected individuals. So I believe that we need to have terms. We need to create some sort of culture of voting as well. Why? Is because, yeah, basically, if you think about the way that the traditional world does it, is okay, every 4 years or every three years, you have these rituals of voting or doing stuff, and people are going to be held accountable if they don't do what they promised in the previous year, let's say in the previous term. So yeah, I believe that accountability is actually going to play a key role in the space. The lack of diversity is very, I don't know, sometimes for me it's hard to talk about this. Most of the space, let's say, is a very privileged space. You know, most of the people that are working in the space, they haven't experienced living in an authoritarian government. They haven't experienced what it is to be a minority. They haven't experienced what it is to go to, let's say, a different part of the world and be judged just based on your color, based on your sex, or based on whatever that doesn't really matter, or your age or whatever. So I think in the space it's really, really important that we bring people that are not, let's say, having the best conditions. Why? Because those people, they're gonna give you, let's say, feedback. They're gonna give you their points of view when it comes to why this technology is going to be used in their, let's say, in their countries or in their places, and how this technology could actually impact their life and make it better for them. So yeah, I believe that we need to have diversity in order to have different points of view, and hopefully create a more, let's say, inclusive space. The other problem, obviously, is the lack of certainty when it comes to regulation. We don't really know like what we're doing, and we're afraid of doing things because, yeah, basically just by writing code you can go to jail. Which is kind of weird to me, and nobody's talking about it. And there's like a few people that talk about it, like what's happened with one of the developers of Tornado Cash. Yeah, it's it's a concern for all of us. Like we don't know what we're going to expect or what we're gonna get just by launching something. And yeah, it creates fear. It creates a lot of fear. And yeah, we need to find ways to challenge this. And I guess the ways is try to find bridges also with the traditional world. Even though we say, okay, we want to create our own world, but we're still in this world. And yeah, there has to be some bridges for us to actually do whatever we think that we should be doing in order to help humanity. Another issue that we have is slow governance. When in DAOs, everyone thinks that everyone should be voting for everything, and I think that's not necessarily right. Why? It's just because people might not have necessarily the expertise. People might not necessarily be involved all the time. Why? Because, as I said before, we don't have the rituals. We don't have like let's say frequency for coming and voting and so on. So for example, if we knew that every 2 weeks we should be voting, you create that habit. So we need to create habits within the DAO space in order to, let's say, improve this slowness in governance. Another problem is plutocracy. Plutocracy, well, basically, I would say that most of the protocols out there, they're managed by token holders. So they're not managed by the people, they're managed by the people with money. And that creates a lot of issues. First, the way that is happening is that these people that do have money are basically participating in governance in order to benefit themselves and extract more for themselves. There's also other problems, like, for example, the people that do have the tokens are able to make proposals to the DAO and actually deplete the DAO treasury because they do have the tokens, and yeah, basically they can just take the money away from the DAO. Slowly, little by little, they can take it. Also, another issue is that, yeah, basically it's not really inclusive. It's not really like thinking about how we can integrate other contributors. People think that by airdropping a token, other people will care because they have some monetary value. This has been proving that no, it's not true. People don't care. They receive a token and what they want to do is just dump it. They just want to, profit. So by giving an airdrop, it won't necessarily mean that the people that receive the airdrop are going to create value for your protocol, are going to create value for your DAO, but rather, they will try to find a way to put some money in their pocket because we're still in this trap, right? And they don't really care. They don't really care. So we need to create more ways for people to actually care about let's say, when it comes to decision making and so on. The power concentration, this happens a lot. This happens a lot when it comes to, just say, allocating tokens to founders and allocating tokens to financial contributors. And there's also a lot of information asymmetry. So sure, people can come and contribute and be part of the DAO and so on, but the information stays very at the top. And the ones that have that information, they are actually able to, let's say, exit, before other people. And yeah, that's an issue. That's a real issue when we have, let's say, these people with a lot of power that can actually destroy the price of the token, destroy the whole organization, just because they have let's say, the financial capital to do so. Also, another thing that can happen is that, coming back to the plutocracy, is that, let's say you don't like a protocol, and you have enough resources, you might buy the tokens and start, let's say, voting against the purpose of the DAO and so on. So this could potentially happen as well. Another problem is the lack of a structure. And I put here what a structure means. A structure is the arrangement of and a relationship between the parts of or elements of something complex. So a structure, I believe, is needed because when you don't have a structure, basically, it doesn't mean that the structure doesn't exist. A structure, there will always be a structure. It's just that it's invisible structure. So I personally prefer to have a visible structure or a transparent structure than an invisible structure. Why? Because when you have an invisible structure, basically the people that have power, that are hidden, they basically can control and do whatever the heck they want. So I personally prefer to have some form of a structure. Another problem is the unbalanced transparency. There's transparency, let's say, maybe how much, let's say, we're going to raise, how much we're going to sell, but there might not be necessary transparency with everything. And transparency could be a double-edged sword. Transparency can create also a lot of problems within communities. So, for example, in DAOs, where all the let's say, salary or grants are completely open and transparent, people start to be humans. We're just humans, and we start to be jealous about what other people are making. That person is probably working only 10 hours. I'm working 30. Why is that person making more than me? And all of these, let's say, normal human issues that we have. But then transparency, on the other hand, is also super, super important because we want to know how actually the tokens are distributed, who are making the decisions on how the tokens are distributed. Also, another issue with, let's say, with when there's not enough transparency, for example, when it comes to all the contributors, is that you run into problems like you might have two people pretending to be one person, for example, and trying to get some grants from the DAO. And yeah, we saw that also with bankless DAO and how someone was actually using Coordinate in order to get more money. And yeah, we see civil attacks because of that. We see people trying to pretend that there are 2, 3, 4 people and just getting money from the DAO. And yeah, just not being fair to all the other contributors. Obviously, one that is very important is the lack of sustainability. Most of the projects in the space, I would say more than 80% of the projects, or even 90% of the projects in the space, they don't generate any revenue. the way that they're sustaining themselves is by selling a token and doping a token. There's real no sustainability in most of the different protocols and the different DAOs in the space. So how can we actually create value that brings more money to the treasury that then can be distributed to the different participants of the DAO? And the last problem that I'm going to talk about is that people are super excited when they meet, let's say, a new girl or a new guy, and they're like falling in love, and you're like, oh wow, this is amazing. And then after a couple of weeks, you start like losing that spark that is there. So how can we actually maintain that spark? Well, I personally believe is by, let's say, creating more fun games and trying to involve the community in many different ways that can hopefully keep them engaged and that the conviction doesn't drop over time. And yeah, those are some of the problems that DAOs have. I can talk for a couple of hours about problems with DAOs, but it's only 20 minutes. If you guys want to connect with me, scan this QR code, send me a message, and thank you so much.